guys, welcome back to Room 237, and in my last video I said I was waiting on one thing to come in, and then I would be wrapping up the Italian horror and Giallo marathon with 3 or 4 films left to do, but something else came up, so it's going to be going on a little bit longer than expected. I hope that doesn't bother anybody, but so I believe my last Giallo review was 1965's The Possessed. And at that point, I said I only had 1965's The Embalmer as my last Giallo. And then I would just be waiting on Nothing Underneath and Too Beautiful to Die to come out or come in. So I picked this up today. Also, I picked up James Wan's Malignant. Please do not spoil this in the comments because I have not seen this yet. It is not a Giallo. This will not be in the Giallo playlist. I've already seen enough people here on YouTube calling it an official Giallo. It's just inspired by the style. So it's not an official Giallo, but I'm still very excited to see it. And my girlfriend, which every year, she gets very excited when she gets me gifts. My birthday's coming up. My birthday's up in December, and so she always ends up giving me gifts early because she gets excited, but she also knew that I was going to be wrapping up the Giallo marathon, so she decided to give me this early, and it is Vinegar Syndrome's Forgotten Gialli Volume 3. Now, Volumes 1 and 2, I just had the standard issue, single case volumes. But she actually got me the nice, very well done box set where each movie has its own Blu-ray, which, just to show real quick, it comes with Autopsy, which I've already reviewed, Crazy Desires of a Murder, and Murder Mansion. So, as far as Giallo or Giallo-related films and Italian films, I actually have all of these to still get to, because I still have Mother of Tears, Hand That Feeds the Dead, and the Giallo homage film, Strange Cody Body's Tears. So the marathon will go on a little bit longer than expected. But this video is going to be from the Forgotten Gialli Volume 3 set, 1972's Murder Mansion, which was directed by Francisco Lara Polyp, who would also go by Pedro Lazaga. Actually, I don't know if that's a co-director credit or if that's an alias that he went by. Yeah, every other thing I'm seeing is Polyp, so that must be an alias that he went by. And this is one that I had heard about. I'm actually not going to say, well, it's also known as The House in the Fog, Exorcism Mansion, When Marta Screams from the Grave, and, oh, it's actually... It's another one in here that I can't say its alternate title until spoilers, because the title actually gives the entire film away. Now, it stars Ida Galli, who actually in this film is credited as Evelyn Stewart, which she went by for most of her films, at least her Giallo. She was in Bloodstained Butterfly, Case of the Bloody Iris, This, The Psychic. She's been in a number of films. I'm looking at a few different sites because there's no Wikipedia. But also of Annalisa Nardi, who is in Case of the Scorpion's Tail. Franco Fantasia, 7 Bloodstained Orchids, Analia Gade, The Fox with the Velvet Tail, Eduardo Fajardo, Evil Eye. I'm guessing that also means Black Sunday. And Yelena Samarina, who is in Jess Franco's Night of the Skull, one of his few Giallo, I guess, films. And of course, Evelyn Stewart. Now, the thing about this movie, and I also want to get who did the score. I don't know if it will actually tell me on this. Probably not. But I actually did like the music, and this is not to be confused with titles like Slaughter Hotel. The title actually kind of makes sense with this one. But I also like the newer artwork that it came with. This also really fits because it has a very gothic atmosphere. This movie is it's a very visual movie. And in fact, to kind of go back to Forgotten Gialli Volume 1, I believe it was. Yeah, Killer is one of 13, which is probably my favorite from this set. My all-time favorite writer of mystery, Agatha Christie. This is another one of those. This is another one of those group of people, more or less strangers. Some of them know each other. In one area, there's some sort of killer or threat, and people are trying to solve the mystery as to what's going on. The Killer's one of 13 was more of like a and then there were none type story. I'll say this one was definitely more character and dialogue and story driven. This one is definitely more visual and atmosphere driven. In fact, it has more in common with the 1960s pre-Argento Giallo than of 1972, which is arguably the best year for Giallo, where the Argento formula was really at its peak, I would say, was 1972. It takes place in this gothic mansion, more wealthy people could potentially deal with, inheritance or schemes or scandals, but with a supernatural twist. And yes, this one does toy around with the ideas of witches and vampires, but is it a hoax? Is it real? That's kind of the mystery. I love the look of the mansion. It has a very classic, like a universal classic, like horror movie look. Because like when we're outside the mansion or like in the nearby cemetery, it looks like a set. It looks like something Ed Wood might have used better than Ed Wood, but you can tell it's all artificial, but it has this charm to it that I really liked. It does have an effective jump scare, and it kind of reminds me of an early Bava film. There were some things that were genuinely creepy that you might see in a Bava film, but there are parts that are kind of laughable. I mean, this is by no means a great Giallo or even a great movie, but it's one that I enjoy. And the music has... I wanted to get the composer's name. I got 3 different websites open, but I don't know if... Oh, and apparently Eduardo Fajardo, I think he plays Porter in this, who's the first one to die. He won Spain's National Syndicate of Spectacle Awards for Best Supporting Actor for this. So, wow. Damn, I really want to find who did the music. But, yeah, anyway, so it's pretty straightforward. I mean, kind of like Killer's one of 13, there are a number of characters that you don't really get to know as characters, and you can kind of lose track of who is who in relation to each other. There's a couple scenes of flashbacks that I guess kind of help out the ending and kind of help build Elsa as one of the more developed characters, even though by that time she's kind of become a shell. She's basically like Judith O'Dea in Night of the Living Dead, just this traumatized, catatonic person. But it is set up similar to it. At the beginning of the film, it shows all the different parties of people out and about, and eventually how they all end up at this house, this mansion. We actually see this one guy named Ernest, who's the husband of Elsa. He's supposed to be getting some sort of documents authenticated or notarized by a lawyer, but he's actually with his mistress, and it sets up that, oh, Elsa and I don't love each other, but I hope we will in the future. She has a great fortune. I have my own fortune. But then we see, okay, there's Fred, who's the guy on a motorcycle. There's Porter, who has a muscle car. There's this one woman whose name I don't remember. She's hitchhiking. She chooses to go with Porter, but he's a bit handsy. So at this gas station diner, she decides to go with Fred. And Elsa, cutting back to Elsa, who is a little on edge. She's been on edge since her father died recently. We find out her father was having relations with some of her college friends, and it became a huge scandal, which there are some funny scenes, like when that's being explained, he says, it was kind of a big, it was actually a big scandal. Someone's like, why? Why would it be a scandal that someone's having sex with college students? I think he was a professor, I don't remember. But she's there with the married couple, the Tremonts, which I think Mr. Tremont, I think is business partners with her husband Ernest, his wife, whose name I don't even think we hear. She's kind of long-suffering as well, kind of a loveless marriage. But anyway, so you have the Tremonts, you have Porter, you have Fred in the hitchhiker on his bike, you have Elsa in her car. I think Elsa's trying to get to Ernest, but her car breaks down out in the fog. Well, first, Fred and the hitchhiker, their bike breaks down or whatever out in the fog. So, of course, they just make out because it's an Italian film. Elsa is behind them. Her car breaks down, and she sees these silhouettes, these ghostly figures that looks like a chauffeur and an elderly woman kind of cackling and coming at her from the fog. She runs into Fred and the hitchhiker. They find a cemetery, which is near a mansion, and that's where they're greeted by Martha. Which, I thought they said Martha, but I know in some of the, I think it said Martha in, yeah, because one of its alternate titles is When Marta Screams from the Grave, but Martha is what they call her. It's what the subtitles say. She's the one played by Evelyn Stewart. But when they get to the mansion, Porter is the one that answers the door because he was in an accident with the Tremonts. And so conveniently, they all converged at this murder mansion. And it's there that Martha tells them the story about how her aunt back in 1942 died in a car accident with her chauffeur. She was a self-proclaimed witch, and people of the nearby village fled because they feared vampires and the land might be haunted. There might be some kind of witchery going on. she doesn't live there full time, but she's there tonight. So we have some kind of mingling, and then it really picks up when everyone decides to go to bed, which Fred and the hitchhiker decide to go exploring. Because Martha gave some sort of story about this door that I guess goes down into like the tombs or crypts of the mansion. He wants to check it out, which, because I think there was some noise like creaking, and she said it was a rat, but they look at the backside of the door and there's like nail marks. Porter keeps going to Elsa's room to try to get lucky, but she kicks him out. And then we see her flashbacks with a party with her father, and I think it was the night she met Ernest, but I could be wrong. And I guess they're supposed to hint towards some sort of incestuous relationship that could have led to why she's kind of traumatized, or why she's been like a mess. But eventually, the third time Porter tries to get lucky is he goes in Martha's room, who is willing, but just he's about to get in bed with her. The chauffeur figure, who, his silhouette, because it's like this big built guy with a blocky head and like a cap, looks like the silhouette of like a Maniac cop. And he's doing like a Tor Johnson kind of performance, like he's just very stiff, and like when he's banging on a door, he's very ape-like, or Tor Johnson. But Porter just has a heart attack and dies. That's how he dies. So the mystery isn't who's the killer. It's, is all this stuff really supernatural, or is it a hoax? And with Fred and the hitchhiker kind of doing a lot of exploring, and Fred's really obsessed with trying to get to the center of everything, it feels more like a Giallo gone Scooby-Doo almost. I would say I didn't like it as much as Killers 1 of 13, because that's the closest one I could compare it to. Because these two are, I would have to say, are the closest to like an Agatha Christie style mystery. But this one did have some great visuals, which most of them I'll get to after spoilers. But yeah, it's only 86 minutes, and it goes at a great pace. I mean, it's very fast moving, especially once they get to the mansion, and then when they all disperse to go to bed. Like, Mrs. Tremont has insomnia, so he gives her some, Mr. Tremont gives her some insomnia pills, which I'll get back to that after spoilers. But yeah, great gothic atmosphere. It relies heavily on atmosphere, and I think it does a good job. Definitely more of a visual film. It is easy to get kind of lost in the number of characters and their relation with each other, just because we don't get a whole lot of time with them to see what they're all about. We do get more time with them than Killers 1 of 13, and there's like half the characters. But yeah, I would say, especially if you like 60s more gothic style horror films, or gialli that might hint towards the supernatural, especially gothic films in the style of Mario Bava, then definitely give it a look. If you think you're gonna get like an Argento murder mystery, like, don't go into it thinking you're gonna get Deep Red or something. But the visuals are definitely worth it, and I actually had a good amount of fun with this. I still don't quite get the ending. The ending does feel a bit rushed, but it took me a second watch, because the first time I was just so exhausted. I was just like, why is this happening now? But it kind of made sense after. But, so yeah. And I'll say already, as far as Forgotten Gialli 3 goes, I've only seen this and Autopsy. I did like this more than Autopsy already, so. But with that, I'm going to get into spoilers, so. So yeah, Porter dies of a heart attack from seeing the chauffeur. Eventually, Fred and the hitchhiker get down into the crypt, and they find Aunt Julie's crypt, like her coffin, that has been opened, and there's no body in it. And they realize there's some tomfoolery going on. At one point, because Elsa's been having a rough night, Martha decides to go. I think she goes to lay with her to keep her company till she falls asleep. But there is this great moment where it's up close on Elsa. She goes to roll over, and she sees the back of Martha's head, and just it's actually a jump scare. You don't get a lot of jump scares in Giallo, but I'd say this one was effective, especially in how it was done. And this is probably like the first time we really get to see Aunt Julie's face, which is basically just Evelyn Stewart with a creepy elderly makeup. There's also a huge portrait of her above the fireplace. But like, she turns her head and there's this loud, like, witchy cackle. So Elsa runs downstairs and we get this this reminded me of Mario Bava. This wide shot of the whole room with, ghostly Aunt Julie coming out of the bedroom and kind of descending down the stairs towards her. And it looks so, like, you can tell it's like makeup or a mask, but there's no expression, and there's just that cackling, and just having be that wide shot, like, coming towards her. Pretty effective. So Elsa runs down into the tunnels, where she finds the body of Mrs. Tremont strung up on hooks. She faints with the torch, which sets fire. At that point, Fred and the hitchhiker come out of the tomb outside. They see Mr. Porter sitting there, and he's holding a pistol, and it goes off. Of course, someone's making him do that. They decide to bring Porter back into the house. People kind of regroup, but Mrs. Tremont and Elsa are still missing. At this point, Mr. Tremont comes down the stairs. And we have a few more scares, like, first Fred decides to try to get to Milan, which I guess is the nearest city, to find the police. So he flees. And then it's just the hitchhiker, Elsa. They go upstairs and they see, because first there's the floating head of Mrs. Tremont that comes at them, which that looks alright too, but they go up to her bedroom and they find her still asleep. She's been asleep this whole time. Her husband just gave her these pills that totally knocked her out. And so at this point, because then the chauffeur comes out to fight Fred, and this is when we see Evelyn Stewart take off the latex mask to reveal she's been Julie the whole time. And Fred gets the upper hand on the chauffeur. His makeup, which is, again, it looks like Tor Johnson, but pale with red eyes. His is kind of ripped. And when his is taken off, it's a guy we've never seen before. It's like another chauffeur or someone that works for Martha. And his name is Igor. Go figure. But this is when Mr. Tremont comes down, and you find out he's been in cahoots with her. And he's the one that set up the prop Mrs. Tremont. He's the one that was wearing all black with the fake head of hers, because he descends down the stairs holding that severed head, and is revealed to be him. And turns out they were doing it to try to drive Elsa mad so she could get locked away in an asylum. Everyone else, like the ones that are still living, Fred and the hitchhiker, are collateral damage because they firmly believe it's witches, vampires, and the supernatural. So they're like, oh, they'll get locked away with her as well. So that's when a POV comes out, and they look at the camera and they're like, oh, it's you. Well, everything went according to plan. We did everything you said. And then, this person is dressed like Giallo, trench coat, fedora, gloves, but he takes out a pistol, shoots the two of them, and it's Ernest. Oh, and also they say they have to take down the speakers and the recordings of all the music and laughing and noises. So then Ernest helps clean up more evidence. But by this time, Fred makes it back. Oh, also, right before Ernest shoots those two, that's when Igor runs through the door and he shoots him right before he can say he hasn't killed Fred yet. So, in their mind, I guess they think Fred's dead. But Fred convinces the hitchhiker to just leave with him. They'll find help, and they'll send help for Mrs. Tremont and Elsa, who at this point is catatonic and traumatized. So they decide to leave the two. So Elsa goes downstairs, sees the massacre that's happened, and when Ernest comes up the stairs, she just grabs the pistol and just starts shooting. And, she's kind of like smiling and laughing almost. You can tell she's totally snapped. And as she's shooting Ernest, she sees her father, like she's shooting him. And then when he falls and dies, she collapses. And you get this great overhead shot of her with all 5 or 6 dead bodies of everyone in the movie that has died. So I'm thinking Ernest hired those two to stage this sort of massacre to make, pretty much drive Elsa mad and have people killed so it looks like she did it, so she could get locked away, so he can not only get her fortune, but he can go live with his mistress. And then he just killed Martha and Mr. Tremont to kill loose ends, I guess. And I guess that would explain some of the convenience, because Ernest and Mr. Tremont being business partners and working together, that's how they could have worked out some of the accidents and getting Elsa kind of anxious to go seek out Ernest herself and to get other people there to help stage it. And then it ends with Fred and the hitchhiker driving off into the distance. It doesn't say what happens to Mrs. Tremont, whom they left sleeping upstairs. So, at one point she's going to wake up and go downstairs, and it's going to kind of be like the ending to Hateful Eight, where it's just like, the next person to walk in there is just going to see this craziness that happened, and she slept through it all. So technically there's 3 survivors. One person didn't even know anything that was going on. But this was a fun movie. I mean, it's not perfect by any means. Definitely a lot of the atmosphere and the scares definitely evoked early Baba feeling and look, which I really liked. I did like the Agatha Christie style mystery. I am glad it didn't go full supernatural. I just don't think supernatural works very well with Giallo. It's an interesting angle to take it. I mean, setting it in this old Gothic mansion and sort of setting it up that spooky things are happening. It also gave it like a Scooby-Doo vibe, and multiple places I've read about this movie, says it feels like Scooby-Doo gone Giallo, or vice versa. So I mean, it's not one of my favorites by any means, but it was still fun. Again, it goes at a great pace. It's very fast, and yeah, I enjoyed Murder Mansion. So yeah, like I said, I have more than originally planned for the rest of the marathon. You know, from Forgotten Jelly 3, I still have Crazy Desires of a Murderer. Then I had Nothing Underneath and Too Beautiful to Die, along with the not Giallo, Hand That Feeds the Dead, Argento's Mother of Tears. I do have Two Evil Eyes. I think I might save that for October, for when I do anthologies again. Giallo, The Embalmer, Giallo homage, Strange Color Your Body's Tears, and the Giallo inspired but not official Giallo, James Wan's Malignant. So yeah, the expected playlist grew a little bit, but anyway, stay tuned for those, and thank you for watching.